Exodus 9:16 says, "And for this reason I have raised you up in order to show you my power and in order to declare my name in all the earth." So there's two things that Yehova is achieving when he guides events on the earth, when he has an influence over events on the earth. The first one is his name. That's the primary thing. It's all about his name. The second one is for us, for our good. Romans 8:28, we know that all matters work together for good to those who love Elohim, to those who are called according to his purpose. So they're the two things, and we're going to see them in all the scenarios that we look at. He does it for the sake of his name, and he does it for the sake of us. Proverbs 21 verse 1 says, "The king's heart," okay, Pharaoh's heart, he's described as the king of Egypt in Scripture. "The king's heart is as channels of water in the hand of Yehova. He inclines it wherever he wishes." Okay? So he can incline the king's heart to whatever he wants. Now, as we've seen before, he doesn't just do this arbitrarily. Okay, he hardens people who are of a hard heart, for example. You never see him change somebody's heart from being good to being bad. You will sometimes see him change a bad person's heart to do good to good people, but you'll never see him change a good person's heart to be bad. In Ezra 6:21-22, it says, "And the children of Israel who had returned from the exile ate together with all who had separated themselves from the uncleanness of the Gentiles to the land in order to seek Yehova Elohim of Israel. And they performed the festival of unleavened bread 7 days with joy. For Yehova caused them to rejoice, and he turned the heart of the king of Ashur, the king of Assyria, toward them to strengthen their hands in the work of the house of Elohim, the Elohim of Israel. He inclined his heart towards them so that he helped them build the temple," basically. 1 Kings 11:4-14 says, "And it came to be, when Shlomo was old, that his wives turned his heart away after other gods, and his heart was not perfect with Yehova his Elohim, as was the heart of his father David." So it doesn't take away from free will at all. Okay, Yehova will turn somebody's heart. Some circumstances he uses events in the person's life to turn their heart away. Like this, you could phrase this as Yehova turned Solomon's heart away. But he didn't really turn Solomon's heart away. He just knew that it was going to happen through the play out of time. It was his free will. He knew from the beginning that Solomon's heart would be turned away by his wives. And Shlomo went after Ashtoreth, the god of the Sidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. Thus Shlomo did evil in the eyes of Yehova, did not follow Yehova completely like his father David. Then Shlomo built a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, on the hill that is east of Jerusalem, and for Moloch, the abomination of the children of Ammon. And so he did for all his foreign wives who burned incense and sacrificed to their gods. Therefore Yehova was enraged with Shlomo because his heart had turned away from Yehova Elohim of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. Okay, so we don't have Yehova appearing to us, but people kind of, I don't know, they take heart in the fact that Shlomo has, or they take heart in the fact that Yehova has really influenced their lives, that he's been a big part of their lives. And so they think, well, he's such a big part of my life. Obviously, you know, if I mess up here and there, it doesn't matter because I know that I'm so close with Yehova. He's so near to me. Well, Shlomo had him appear to him twice, and he'd given him all of this wisdom, he'd given him all of this wealth and all this standing in the world. He'd favored him above any man that was on the earth at this time. And yet he still turned away. So we can take a lesson from that. It doesn't matter how much we see Yehova involved in our life. That's no guarantee of anything. He's no respecter of persons. In fact, the more that we see him involved in our lives, the more responsibility we have to do the things he says to do for us. For us to do for him. And had commanded him concerning this word, not to go after other gods. But he did not guard what Yehova had commanded. And Yehova said to Shlomo, because you've done this and have not guarded my covenant and my laws which I have commanded you, I shall certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to your servant. Only I do not do it in your days for the sake of your father David. Out of the hand of your son I shall tear it. Only I shall not tear away all the kingdom, but give one tribe to your son for the sake of my servant David and for the sake of Yerushalayim which I have chosen. And Yehova raised up an adversary against Shlomo, Hadad the Edomite. He was of the seed of the king in Edom. So we see Yehova raising up these enemies against the king of Israel. And it's interesting the way that we see him doing it. Later in that passage, it says, and Elohim raised up another adversary against him, Rezon, son of Eliada, who had fled from his master, Hadadezer, king of Zophah, and gathered men to him and became commander over a raiding band when David slew those of Zophah. And they went to Damascus and dwelt there and reigned in Damascus. And he was an adversary of Yisrael all the days of Shlomo, besides the trouble that Hadad caused. And he was hostile to Yisrael and reigned over Aram. And a servant of Shlomo, Jeroboam, son of Nevat, an Ephraimite from Zeredah, whose mother's name was Zeruah, a widow, also lifted up a hand against the king. And this is what caused him to lift up a hand against the king. Shlomo had built Millo, repairing the breaks in the city of David, his father. So what actually caused this guy to come against him? Yes, Yehova ultimately caused him to come against Shlomo, but what caused him was Solomon's own actions. So Yehova weaves all of these things together, all of these events. He knew that Shlomo's heart was going to be turned from him, and then he knew that Shlomo was going to do something to turn this other guy against him as well. Daniel 2:21 says he changes the times and the seasons. This isn't talking about the little horn power which we see in Daniel 7 when it says he changes the times and seasons. This is talking about Yehova himself. It says he changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings and he raises up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who possess understanding. And the book of Daniel is a great text for us to see how he interacts with rulers, the way that he influences rulers. So I'm going to read from the end of Daniel 3 to the end of Daniel 6. And we're going to see three different kings and how Yehova interacts with them all. We read through in Torah portion Noach, the fiery furnace, when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were cast into the fiery furnace. And they said, our Elohim is able to save us from this. But even if he doesn't, we're not going to break his word. So after this, to these events, it says, Nebuchadnezzar responded and said, blessed be the Allah of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his messenger and delivered his servants who trusted in him and changed the king's order and gave up their bodies that they should not serve nor do obeisance to any Allah except their own Allah. So what we see here is one of the things that he does when he establishes his name, or he glorifies his name through his interactions. And indeed, this is how Nebuchadnezzar begins to recognize him. It says, therefore, I make a decree that whoever of any people, nation, or language who speaks any wrong against the Allah of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, his limbs shall be taken and his house made a dunghill, because there is no other Allah who is able to deliver like this. So he's establishing who he is in the king's eyes, just like we saw him say to Pharaoh, okay, I'm going to do this in you. I've raised you up in order to establish my power. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babel. So two things that he does. Glorifies his name, and all matters work for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in the earth, peace be increased to you. I thought it good to declare the signs and wonders which the Most High Allah has worked for me. Okay, so again, he's establishing his name. how great are his signs and how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his rulership is from generation to generation. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in my house and prospering in my palace. I saw a dream and it frightened me, and the thoughts of my bed and the visions of my head alarmed me. So I issued a decree to bring in all the wise ones of Babel before me, to make known to me the interpretation of the dream. So the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the diviners came in, and I related the dream to them, but its interpretation they did not make known to me. And at last, Daniel, whose name is Belteshazzar, according to the name of my ale, his ale, Baal, came before me. In him is the spirit of the set-apart Allah. So I related the dream to him, saying, now it's interesting what he's just said. He said, I've called him after the name of my ale, Baal. But he says, in him is the spirit of the set-apart Allah, he who is set apart from the world. Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the set-apart Allah is in you, and no secret is too difficult for you. Explain to me the visions of the dream that I've seen and its interpretation. So Daniel, as we'll see later on as well, is well known. Obviously he is a righteous guy. He lives by the law. He lives by the scriptures. The king recognizes him as somebody who is a good guy, basically, somebody who is capable. Now the visions of my bed, of my head on my bed were these. I looked and saw a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height great. So this is one of those symbolic dreams that we were talking about. It's another example of a symbolic dream. The tree became great and strong, and its height reached to the heavens, and it was visible to the ends of all the earth. Its leaves were lovely, and its fruit plenty, and in it was food for all. The beasts of the field found shade under it, and the birds of the heavens dwelt in its branches, and all flesh was fed from it. In the visions of my head on my bed, I looked and saw a watcher, even a set-apart one, coming down from the heavens. He cried aloud and said this, hew down the tree and cut off its branches, strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the beasts flee from under it, and the birds from under its branches. But leave the stump of its roots in the earth, even with a band of iron and bronze in the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of the heavens, and let his portion be with the beasts on the grass of the earth. Let his heart be changed from a man's, let him be given the heart of a beast, and 7 times pass over him. So this is interesting because it makes a distinction between what goes on in a man's heart and what goes on in an animal's heart when we consider things like Balaam's donkey that began to speak and was able to give speech to its thoughts. That had the heart of a beast, and it was speaking from the heart of a beast. The heart of a man, heart of a beast. It talks later about his understanding was changed. We hear about Solomon being given a wise and understanding heart. We know the conscience and the thoughts and the intentions all reside in the heart. It says, and let 7 times pass over him. Now, the usual sort of understanding as to what a time is it's a year. But I don't think so. I don't agree personally. This word comes from a word that is actually related to a word that means menstruation. So I think it's probably more something to do with the cycle of the moon. That's my guess, it's my opinion. It's not founded on anything solid, but that's just where I'm coming from with it. I don't think that these events happened over 7 years. This matter is by the decree of the watchers and the command by the word of the set-apart ones, so that the living know that the Most High is ruler in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomever he wishes and sets over it the lowest of men. So this is something that's repeated throughout all of the narrative. The reason that this is happening to the king is so that the living know, so that we know that the Most High, Yehova, is ruler in the kingdom of men right now. Gives it to whomever he wishes, and he sets over it the lowest of men. So when we look around and we look at our rulers and we think these people aren't up to much, we need to know that it is Yehova who has established them in their positions, and he's done it for his purposes. This dream have I seen, I, King Nebuchadnezzar, and you, Belteshazzar reveal its interpretation, since all the wise ones of my kingdom are unable to make known to me the interpretation. But you are able, for the spirit of the set apart lies in you. And we'll see that they talk about Daniel later on in terms of him having light, basically. He's a light to these people. This is how we need to be to people around us. They should recognize in us that we are capable people, but we're able because we've got this set apart spirit of Elohim. We're different from people. Then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was stunned for a short time, and his thoughts alarmed him. The king responded and said, Belteshazzar, do not let the dream or its interpretation alarm you. Belteshazzar answered and said, my master, the dream is to those who hate you, and its interpretation to your enemies. The tree you saw, which became great and strong, whose height reached to the heavens and was visible to all the earth, whose leaves were lovely and its fruit plenty, and in it was food for all, under which the beasts of the field dwelt, and on whose branches the birds of the heavens sat. It is you, O king, for you have become great and strong, and your greatness has grown and has reached to the heavens, and your rulership to the end of the earth. Now, Nebuchadnezzar doesn't strike me as a particularly great guy. It talks about him later executing those who he wants to, and not a good guy. Yet, by the power of Yehova, his power was extended to the entire earth because it was Yehovah's will that this be done. And as the king saw a watcher, even a set-apart one, coming down from the heavens, and he said, hew down the tree and destroy it, but leave the stump of its roots in the earth, even with the band of iron and bronze in the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of the heavens, and let his portion be with the beasts of the field, till 7 times pass over him. And this is the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of the Most High, which has come upon my master the king. That you are going to be driven away from men, and your dwelling be with the beasts of the field, and you be given grass to eat like oxen, and you be wetted with the dew of the heavens, and 7 times pass over you, till you know that the Most High is ruler in the kingdom of men, and he gives it to whomever he wishes. And they that gave the command to leave the stump of its roots of the tree, your kingdom remained yours, from the time you come to know that the heavens are ruling. Therefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable to you, and break off your sins by righteousness, and your crookedness by showing favor to the poor. Your prosperity might be extended. So you've got a chance now. Okay? Break off your sins, telling us he's not a good guy. Show favor to the poor. Again, you've got a chance. Change yourself. Your prosperity might be extended. All this came upon King Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of the 12 months, he was walking about the palace of the kingdom of Babel. The king spoke and said, is not this great Babel which I've built for the house of my kingdom by the might of my power and for the esteem of my splendor? So he gets a bit big for his boots. The word was still in the king's mouth when the voice fell from the heavens. King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken, the kingdom has been taken away from you. And I'm sure that all of the rulers of the earth don't ascribe their kingdom to Yehova. They probably all think, look at this great thing that I've done by the might of my power. They're just as unaware that it's Yehova behind them as Nebuchadnezzar. And you are driven away from men, and your dwelling is to be with the beasts of the field. You are given grass to eat like oxen, and 7 times shall pass over you, until you know that the Most High is ruler in the kingdom of men, and gives it to whomever he wishes. In that hour the word was executed on Nebuchadnezzar, and he was driven from men, and he ate grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of the heavens, till his hair had grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like bird's claws. And at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up my eyes to the heavens, and my understanding returned to me. And I blessed the Most High and praised and made him great who lives forever, whose rule is an everlasting rule, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. And all the inhabitants of the earth are of no account. And he does as he wishes with the host of the heavens and among the inhabitants of the earth. And there is none to strike against his hand or say to him, what have you done? Okay, so we've looked before at the idea that we shouldn't be ascribing power to Hasatan and saying, it's Satan. Satan's doing all these things. He's putting everyone in position to power, and, it's going to be terrible for us. We're going to see as we go through that these people try their best to go against Yehova. They try their best to go against his Messiah. They make decrees to try and afflict the righteous. But we'll see how Yehova responds. At the same time, my understanding returned to me, and for the preciousness of my kingdom, my esteem and splendor were returning to me. My counselors and nobles sought me out, and I was reestablished in my kingdom, and excellent greatness was added to me. So at exactly the time that Yehova said, all these people come and seek him out, and his kingdom was given back to him. It was reestablished, and excellent greatness was added to him. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, am praising and exalting and esteeming the King of the heavens, but all his works are truth and his ways right. And those who walk in pride, he is able to humble. So again, what we've got him doing here, he's exalting his name. Belshazzar, different to Daniel. Daniel is Belteshazzar. This is a king. His name is Belshazzar. Belshazzar, the king, made a great feast for 1,000 of his great men and drank wine in the presence of the 1,000. While tasting the wine, Belshazzar gave orders to bring the gold and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple. Okay, so his father was this previous king that we heard about. And he says, go and get all of the stuff from the temple, all of the vessels of gold and silver, which had been in Jerusalem, that the king and his great men, his wives and concubines could drink from them. Then they brought the gold vessels that had been taken out of the temple of the house of Allah, which had been in Jerusalem. And the king and his great men, his wives and his concubines, drank out of them. They drank wine and praised the Elohim of gold and of silver, of bronze, of iron, of wood and stone. Okay, so they counted him as nothing, basically. This is an act of the rulers of the earth to mock Elohim or to show their great power. Go and get all the things out of the temple of Yehova, bring them to us so that we can drink wine. At that moment, the fingers of a man's hand appeared and wrote opposite the lampstand on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's color changed and his thoughts alarmed him, so that the joints of his hips were loosened and his knees knocked against each other. The king called loudly to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans and the diviners. The king spoke and said to the wise ones of Babel, whoever reads this writing and shows me its interpretation is robed in purple and has a chain of gold around his neck and shall be third ruler in the kingdom. So all the king's wise ones came, but they were unable to read the writing or make known its interpretation to the king. Then King Belshazzar was greatly alarmed, and his color changed, and his great men were puzzled. The queen, because of the words of the king and his great men, came to the banquet hall, and the king spoke and said, O king, live forever. Do not let your thoughts alarm you, nor let your color change. There is a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the set-apart Allah. And in the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the Elohim, were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, made him the chief of magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and diviners. So Daniel is known. Okay, Daniel, I imagine, was just going about his life, doing the things that Daniel does. But because of who he was known in the kingdom. Because an excellent spirit, knowledge and understanding, interpreting dreams and explaining riddles, solving difficult problems were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and let him show the interpretation. So Daniel was brought in before the king. The king spoke and said to Daniel, are you that Daniel who is one of the sons of the exile from Yehuda, whom my father the king brought from Yehuda? I have heard of you that the spirit of Allah is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you. And the wise ones, the astrologers, have been brought in before me, that they should read this writing and make known to me its interpretation, but they were unable to show the interpretation of the word. And I myself have heard of you, that you are able to give interpretations and solve difficult problems. Now, if you are able to read the writing and make known its interpretation to me, you are to be robed in purple and have a chain of gold around your neck, and shall be third ruler in the kingdom. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, let your gifts be for yourself, and give your rewards to another. Yet I shall read the writing to the king, and make known the interpretation to him. O king, the most high Allah, Nebuchadnezzar, your father, a kingdom and greatness, and gave your father a kingdom, greatness and preciousness and esteem. And because of the greatness which he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whomever he wished, he executed. And whomever he wished, he kept alive. And whomever he wished, he raised up. And whomever he wished, he made low. But when his heart was lifted up, and his spirit was strong so as to act proudly, he was put down from his kingly throne, and they took his preciousness from him. Then he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. He was given grass to eat like oxen, and his body wet with the dew of the heavens, till he knew that the Most High Allah is ruler in the kingdom of men, and sets up over it whomever he wishes. And you, his son, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, although you knew all of this. And you've lifted up yourself against the master of the heavens. And they brought before you the vessels of his house, and you and your great men, your wives and your concubines have been drinking wine from them. And you have praised the Elohim of silver and of gold, of bronze, of iron, of wood and stone, which neither see, nor hear, nor know. But the Allah who holds your breath in his hand and owns all of your ways, you have not made great. Then the part of the hand was sent from him, and this writing was inscribed. And this is the writing that was inscribed, Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. And this is the interpretation of each word. Mene, Allah has numbered your kingdom and put an end to it. And that's repeated twice. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found lacking. And Perez, your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Perez is a verb in Aramaic. It means to divide in two. Upharsin is the same word. It's just like the modified form of this verb. Then Belshazzar gave orders, and they robed Daniel in purple and put a chain of gold around his neck. And they proclaimed concerning him that he is the third ruler of the kingdom. So he makes his name known to the king again. And then he does good for Daniel. In that night, Belshazzar, king of the Chaldeans, was slain, and Darius the Mede, took over the kingdom, being about 62 years old. It pleased Darius to appoint over the kingdom 120 viceroys to be over all the kingdom, and over them 3 governors, of whom Daniel was one, so that these viceroys should give account to them, and the king suffer no loss. Then this Daniel has distinguished himself above the governors and viceroys because an excellent spirit was in him. So again, because of who he was, because he was walking in Yahweh's ways, he distinguishes himself. And when he does this, when he walks in his ways, he doesn't turn to the left or to the right. Yahweh can work in that situation. The king planned to appoint him over all the kingdom. And the governors and viceroys sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom. But they were unable to find occasion or corruption, because he was steadfast and no negligence or corruption was found in him. Then these men said, "We shall not find any occasion against Daniel unless we find it against him concerning the law of his Allah." Okay, so these people, these other powerful people, wanted to find a problem with Daniel. But because he did everything right, they couldn't find a problem with him. So what they're going to have to do is engineer a situation by which a problem is found with him. They create a new law. It says, then these governors and viceroys tumultuously gathered before the king and said to him, "King Darius, live forever. All the governors of the kingdom, the nobles and viceroys, the counselors and advisors have consulted together to establish a royal decree and to make a strong interdict that whoever petitions any Allah or man for 30 days except you, O king, is thrown into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the interdict and sign the writing so that it is not to be changed, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not pass away." So King Darius signed the written interdict. And Daniel, when he knew that the writing was signed, went home, and in his upper room with his windows open toward Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees there 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his Allah as it had been done before. So it makes a point of saying he knew that this had been signed into law. He knew that the law said, if you pray to God, then you're going to be thrown into a den of lions. There will come times in the future, I'm sure, when laws are passed to say that we cannot do the things that Yahweh tells us to do. And perhaps even there will be on pain of death. But we can take we can take a lesson from the way that Daniel is and what happens to Daniel, how Yehova treats him. You would think, normally, I can't do this. If I do this, I'm going to be killed. But it actually turns out to be Daniel's obedience which saves him. Then these men tumultuously gathered and found Daniel praying and entreating before his Allah. Then they approached the king and spoke concerning the king's interdict. Have you not signed an interdict that every man who petitions any Allah or man within 30 days except you, O king, is thrown into the den of lions? The king answered and said, the word is certain according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not pass away. Then they answered and said before the king, Daniel, who is one of the sons of the exile from Yehuda, pays no heed to you, O king, nor for the interdict which you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. Then the king, when he heard these words, was greatly displeased with himself and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him, and he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. Because obviously Daniel's got favor in the eyes of the king. But this law has been passed, which even the king himself cannot change. He can't stop this from happening. Then these men tumultuously gathered before the king and said to the king, know, O king, that this is the law of the Medes and Persians, that any interdict or decree which the king establishes is not to be changed. Then the king gave orders, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the den of lions. But the king spoke and said to Daniel, your Allah, whom you serve continually, he himself delivers you. So this is quite a remarkable thing for a pagan king to be saying. He's seen Daniel. He knows what Daniel's about. The king has faith that his Allah is going to save him. It says, a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signets of his great men, and that the situation of Daniel might not be changed. The king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No entertainment was brought before him, and his sleep fled from him. So this is quite a thing as well for the king to be fasting, presumably on Daniel's behalf. Then the king rose up very early in the morning and hurried to the den of lions. And when he came to the den, he called with a grieved voice to Daniel. The king spoke and said to Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living Allah, has your Allah, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions? Okay, now we've got a chance for Yehovah's name to be exalted. Yes, for good to be done to Daniel, but for his name to be exalted. Then Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. Now it's remarkable when you see Daniel talking to all of these kings. These are not good men, and yet he's respectful to them. He's kind and he's respectful to them, exactly the way that we're to be. My Allah has sent his messenger and has shut the lions' mouths, and they did not harm me because I was found innocent before him. Okay, so again, he testifies of the name of Yehova, that because he was found innocent before him, the lions didn't harm him. And also before you, O king, I have done no harm. Then the king was very glad and gave orders that Daniel be taken up out of the den. And Daniel was taken up out of the den. No harm was found on him because he trusted in his Allah. And the king gave orders, and they brought those men who had accused Daniel, and they threw them, their children, their wives into the den of lions. And the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces before they reached the floor of the den. So you've got these people in positions of power, and they're trying to do harm to Yehovah's people. But what ends up happening to them in the end? Then King Darius wrote to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be increased to you. From before me is made a decree that throughout every rule of my kingdom, men are to tremble and fear before the Allah of Daniel, for he is the living Allah and steadfast forever, and his kingdom is one which is not destroyed, and his rule is unto the end. He delivers and rescues, and he works signs and wonders in the heavens and on earth, for he has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. And this Daniel prospered in the kingdom of Darius and in the kingdom of Koresh the Persian. That's Cyrus the Persian. So what we've got, Yehovah's name being exalted, and all matters working together for good, for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. In Psalm 2, it says, why do the Gentiles rage and the people meditate emptiness? The kings of the earth take their stand, and the rulers take counsel together against Yehovah and against his Messiah. Okay, so don't expect the rulers of the earth to be on Yahweh's side just because he's put them in the positions of power that he has. They take counsel against him. They're against him. Verse 3 says, let us tear apart their bonds and throw away their ropes from us. They don't want the bondage, as they say it, of Yahweh, or the bondage of his Messiah. They want to cast away these bonds and be free and establish these things and make themselves great in their own power. He who is sitting in the heavens laughs. Yahweh mocks at them. This is what we've got to remember when we look at all of these things that are going on in the earth. Yahweh is just laughing at them. Like, yeah, okay. Then he speaks to them in his wrath, and he troubles them in his rage, saying, but I've set my king on Zion, my set-apart mountain. I inscribe for a law. Yahweh has said to me, you are my son. Today I have brought you forth. Ask of me, and I make the Gentiles your inheritance, and the ends of the earth your possession. Break them with a rod of iron, dash them to pieces like a potter's vessel. And now be wise, O kings. Be instructed, you rulers of the earth. I don't think they're going to listen, but this is what Yahweh's advice to them is. Serve Yahweh with fear and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be enraged and you perish in the way, for soon his wrath is to be kindled. Blessed are all those taking refuge in him. John 10:36-42 says, do you say of him whom the Father set apart and sent into the world, you are blaspheming because I said, I am the Son of Elohim? If I do not do the works of my Father, do not believe me. But if I do, though you do not believe me, believe the works, so that you know and believe that the Father is in me and I in him. Therefore they were seeking again to seize him, but he went forth out of their hand. Okay, this is something that we need to bear in mind when we're looking at these things. Okay, so what about immediate threats of physical danger to us? And there's a whole host of different outcomes with this that we're going to look at. But these people were seeking to seize Yeshua, but he went forth out of their hand and went once more to the other side of the Ardain, to the place where Yochanan was immersing at first, and he stayed there. And many came to him and said, Yochanan indeed did no sign, yet all that Yochanan said about this man was true. And it says, and many believed on him there. So Yahweh wanted him to go on and fulfill his purpose and to make his name great in the earth. So what happened? All of these men came against him with all of their cleverness, with all of their force to come and seize him, and he just went forth out of their hand. If it's Yahweh's will that happens, it's Yahweh's will. So Luke 4 says, and he said to them, no doubt you shall say this proverb to me, physician, heal yourself. Whatever we have heard being done in Capharnaum, also do here in your country. And he said, truly I say to you, no prophet is accepted in his own country. But truly I say to you, many widows were in Israel in the days of Eliyahu, when the heaven was shut up for 3 years and 6 months, and there was great scarcity of food in all the land. And Eliyahu was sent to none of them, but to Zarephath of Sidon, to a woman, a widow. And many lepers were in Israel in the time of Elisha the prophet, and none of them were cleansed except Naaman the Aramean. So basically, he's saying, look, none of them were worthy of this attention, and you're not worthy of it too, so obviously they're not pleased. And those in the congregation, when they heard this, were filled with wrath. And rising up, they drove him out of the city and brought him to the brow of the hill on which the city was built in order to throw him down. So you've got this big rabble. They take hold of Yeshua and they take him up to the top of the hill to cast him off and kill him. But he, passing through the midst of them, went away. If it's Yahweh's will, then no one can come against us. We've got to remember this in these situations. If it's Yahweh's will, then we will be fine. And he promises such protection. Now I want to read through the story of Jeremiah in Jeremiah 37 and 38, because we see Jeremiah being remarkably protected, and the way that he's protected is amazing. But first I want to relate the story of what happened to the Dudex this week. I'm sure that most people here are familiar with this. For anybody who's online, the Dudex are an American family who came over, and Yah had led them to come over and to live here. They can live in Britain for 6 months. According to the law, they can live in Britain for 6 months. Then, unless they have a visa, they must leave the country for 6 months, and then they can re-enter. So at Sukkot this year, there was a guy called Gary who came along. Gary lives in Ireland, and Ireland's one of the places, the nearest place, in fact, that they could go to, and then re-enter after 6 months. So they've gone to live with Gary, and they were there for 3 months in Ireland. After that 3 months, they would have to leave Ireland unless they can get another stamp on their passport to say that they can stay in Ireland again. So the relevant part of the story starts when Mel went over. Mel went over to Ireland to stay with them. And when they went to meet Mel, they had an encounter with 2 immigration agents. There's a woman and there was a man. And the man's name was William. And William will be relevant as we go on. The woman took great offense to what they told to her and said that they were abusing the system and this, that, and the other. Now, as they've spoken to various immigration people, they've had different stories from the different immigration people that they've spoken to. But this woman came and was against them. What Jeff did is he acted very kindly towards her, and he said to her, "I submit to your authority." And by all accounts, I wasn't there, but by all accounts, Jeff said she melted when he said this. And just this act of doing what Yehova says to do in his word had these good effects. And then when she spoke to them, she told them all the things that they needed to know in order for the rest of what's going to transpire. So Mel stayed there, she came back home, and it came to Jeff's mind that they still had 1 day of those 6 months left that they could come into the country. So he was praying about whether or not he should do this. Should we go there for a day? And he said that at the exact time, like literally the exact second that he was praying, at the end of the Torah portion a couple of weeks ago, I said, at the time of their visitation. And he said the way that I said it and the way that they went back and looked at it, it was like weird. It was disjointed from the rest, and it was just like a separate statement. So this was at the exact time he was praying, so he took it as confirmation. They came over to Britain, and their plan was, when they went back into Ireland, that they would get their passports stamped, and then they'd be allowed to stay in Ireland for another 3 months. So when they came in at the port, they tried to encounter a customs agent at the port. They spoke to the security there. He went on the phone. No customs agent there. What you're going to have to do is go to the local Garda station. And for people online, Garda are the police in Ireland. You're going to have to go to the local Garda station, speak to the immigration officer there. Went to the Garda station. There was no immigration officer there. They were told what you'll have to do is you'll have to go to your county Garda station, speak to the county Garda. So they go back to Wexford, go to the county Garda station. Jeff speaks to the person there. No immigration officer here, give us your name, we'll get them to call you back. Jeff sees them writing his name in the logbook. He goes away, a couple of days later he comes back and he says, "I've not had a phone call." They check the logbook that they've got there, names aren't there. He said, "But I saw them write my name in the book." So they went and got another logbook, a smaller one. They're checking through that, and they find their name in there, but it's been crossed out. Like they were going through the book, crossing out the people that had been called. So they've been crossed out. So Jeff thought, well, maybe it's because I've got a UK phone. Maybe if I give them Gary's number, they'll be able to get in touch. So he gives them Gary's number. They call Gary. He tells Jeff, and he calls this guy back. Now, as this is happening, Tanya's in touch with Ashley. She says there's a possibility that we're going to have to leave Ireland. Okay, so I'm aware of this, and I'm doing this Torah portion at the moment with all of this stuff that the Torah portion's about, with people in authority and how to interact with them. Well, Jeff speaks to this guy, and the guy says, "No, you're going to have to go. You're abusing the system. That's it. You're going to have to leave Ireland." Now, the way that Jeff's looking at it at the time is, we came in to the port, we tried to encounter immigration there, couldn't encounter immigration there, went to the Garda station, couldn't encounter them there. Then, speak to this guy, And he says, you've got to leave Ireland. At the time I'm doing the Torah portion, they're now thinking, well, we've got to leave. Where are we going to go? This is like Yehovah's led us to this point. Why has he led us here only for us to go back to the US? This just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. If that's what his will is, then that's what his will is. But it doesn't seem to make sense at this point. Now I'm doing this Torah portion. I don't know that they've had this phone call and been told you have got to leave Ireland. And there's certain things that we'll see in the second part that are around us making plans and Yehovah establishing our plans. And the things like being honest, not lying, having just weights and measures. Just certain things that seem to be around this idea. So I think in my head, I've got to ring Jeff and tell him these things. I thought, well, I don't need to tell Jeff these things. It's a bit patronizing. I'm not going to ring him up and tell him this, but it was burning in my head. You need to ring him, you need to ring him, you need to ring him over like the next hour and a half. So in the end, I said to Ashley, we're in the middle of something. I said to her, I'm going to ring Jeff. Call Jeff up. And he says, we've just been told that we've got to leave the country. So to me, I'm like, well, this is it. They've been told now they've got to leave the country. This is something official. They're leaving the country. And he says the way that he sees it, they've been told that twice and now they've had this word. This is Yehovah's will. Otherwise, they would have encountered somebody and had their passports stamped when they entered the country. He tells me that this guy had said to them, if I'd been there that night when you entered the country, I would have refused you entry. And I said to him, just joking, I just said to him, yeah, but you weren't, were you? Just joking, it's not what I would have said to him. But at the moment that I said that, something clicked in my head. I was like, he wasn't there. The immigration people weren't there when you came into the country. They weren't at the police station. They should have been at both of those places. They weren't there. Then this guy wasn't there. This guy who would have said no, they've been told would have said no, he wasn't there either. So I said, well, what you've had is a series of opinions from all of these people. Some of them saying, yeah, it'll be fine. And some of them saying, no, you're going to have to go. I said, you need to get an official opinion on whether or not you can stay in the country. So Jeff gets off the phone and he's obviously thinking about this. He's texting me and he says, do you really think that we should go up to Dublin? And I said, what has actually happened is not that you've had the official opinion of Ireland, the official position. What's happened is Yehovah has navigated you on a course through this situation where you came back and there was no one there. There was no one at the police station. This guy who would have said no, he wasn't there. Now you're at the stage where you need to go to Dublin and get the official word so you can officially find out what's happening here. So they go off to Dublin. When they arrive in Dublin, they go to the main immigration centre in Dublin and they tell them, we don't have any boarding stamps. Okay, they want basically a stamp on their passport that says, any landing stamps rather, that they landed on that date and the stamps given in their passport, and then that would allow them 3 months more in the country. And they say, we don't have the landing stamps here. Go to the local Garda station. Okay, this is the one that they went to when they landed. So they went there, and there's some kind of kerfuffle there. There's some drunk people there, some kind of delay. When they finally get to speak to somebody, and again, they're very kind of kind to the people there. The guy looked at them as if to apologize, and Jeff just kind of smiles kindly and says, it's okay, don't worry, we'll wait. When they get to speak to somebody, they tell them that the agent, who is the immigration agent, is out on an assault call. Now, I don't know how it works, whether or not they've got that workload to do, but it does seem a bit weird, the immigration agent being out on an assault call. So they say, there's nothing that we can do for you. So they're thinking, what do we do? They decide to go back to the port. Who's going to have the landing stamps? Who can do all these things? The port can do them. They go back to the port, and they're aware of a building that the only reason that they're aware of is from the very first time that they came to Ireland. They were made aware of this building. So there's been this huge, great chain of events, all these things leading to now. So they go to this building where they know that the immigration officers might be. Jeff knocks on the door, no answer. Or possibly rings the bell and there's no answer. He goes back and he rings the bell and knocks on the door. And then a guy comes to the door. And lo and behold, who is it? It's William. William, the guy that they met when they went to pick Mel up. Okay, William, the guy who was with the very irate woman who they placated. So William comes to the door. What's the very first thing William says to them? He says, "I'm not stamping your passport." Great. Now, when I had text Jeff back, he said, "It's funny, just as you sent that text, we were talking about how we'd encountered all these little agents, and what we need to do now is go up to Egypt to see Pharaoh and get Pharaoh's opinion on it." What's the first thing that William says when he answers the door? "I'm not signing your passport." Sounding familiar. William says to them, "There's no way that I can stamp your passport retroactively, because the agent that stamps your passport has to have been there when you entered into the country. If they weren't there when you entered into the country, then there would be a paper trail back that would show that the stamp was illegitimate and I'd lose my job." So obviously they're like, "Well, we don't want you to lose your job over this, but there's nothing I think you can do." It transpires. William says there's nothing that he could do at all. So they accept it and they turn around to walk away. And at the moment that they turn around to walk away, William says to them, "Give me your passports, I'll stamp them." Now it turns out, William tells them later that as they turned around, something told him to stamp their passports. And he says, "I'm a man of God as well." And they get the opportunity to witness to William and tell him who Yehova truly is, to glorify his name, to exalt his name. Not only this, I mean, William's been saying to them, "No, I can't do it. No, I can't do it. No, I can't do it," like Pharaoh. Then at the end, he confesses his sin to them. And he says, "I was here that night. I was asleep in this building. That's why they couldn't have got their passport stamped. And that's why it had to be exactly him who was there at that exact time, who knew all of their history. You know, he'd been saying to them, "I know you've been doing everything that you could have possibly done. I know that you've been righteous in this. I know that you won't break the law, that you won't go to the UK, you won't break customs and immigration law. I know that you've been righteous." It's been him that's been involved throughout it. And then it was him that was there who happened to be asleep when they entered in. Maybe he wouldn't have been able to stamp the passport, or he wouldn't have stamped the passport because of what had happened with his colleague. Who knows how it would have actually transpired. And it came to my mind afterwards, if they'd had their passport stamped when they entered into Ireland at that time, they would have been in Ireland less than the 3 months. So it would have only been 5 months and some days that they were allowed in Ireland. That wouldn't give them the 6 months that they'd have needed to be in Ireland before they could even come over to England. So all of these delays that were there, all these really weird delays, the immigration officers not being there, had to have been exactly that way in order for them to be in Ireland for that exact amount of time, to be able to come back in. It had to happen exactly like that. And it had to be that they walked righteously. They didn't try to bend anything. They didn't try to get those stamps or tell people something that maybe would favor them. They walked exactly in the right, didn't go to the left or to the right, and it ended up with them having that stamp, which could have come about in no other way. And I tell you that before I read through the story of Jeremiah, because that's like a modern day retelling of what happens to Jeremiah in this. So Jeremiah 37 says, "And King Zidkiyahu, son of Yoshiyahu, reigned instead of Konyahu of Jehoiakim, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babel, set up to reign in the land of Yehudah." So this is the king Nebuchadnezzar that we saw in the story of Daniel. "But neither he nor his servants, nor the people of the land had listened to the words of Yehova, which he spoke by the prophet Yirmiyahu," that's Jeremiah. "And Zidkiyahu the king sent Yehuchal, son of Shelemiah, and the priest Zephaniah, son of Maaseiah, to the prophet Yirmiyahu, saying, "Please pray to Yehova our Elohim for us." Now Yirmiyahu was still coming and going among the people, for they had not yet put him in prison. A bit of a spoiler there. Meanwhile, Pharaoh's army had set out from Mitzrayim, and when the Chaldeans who were besieging Jerusalem heard news of them, they withdrew from Jerusalem. Okay, so you've got the Chaldeans and they've got a siege of Jerusalem. Pharaoh's army comes to help the people in Jerusalem, and the Chaldeans hear about this and they withdraw their siege. So the city of Jerusalem is no longer under siege. And the word of Yehova came to Yirmiyahu the prophet, saying, "Thus said Yehova the Elohim of Yisrael, say this to the king of Yehudah, who sent to me to inquire of me. See, Pharaoh's army, which has come up to help you, shall turn back to Mitzrayim, to their own land." Okay, so we've got these events. The king of Judah has inquired of Yehovah and he wanted an answer. Okay, so that's one event which has set all of this in motion. I want an answer from Yehovah. So Yehovah says, "Go to the king of Judah and tell him, see, Pharaoh's army which has come up to help you shall turn back to Mitzrayim, to their own land, and the Chaldeans shall return and fight against this city and take it and burn it with fire." Now we get told later in the narrative that the king of Yehudah is sat in the gate of Benjamin. So that's where he would have to go in order to tell the king of Judah this. "Thus said Yehovah, do not deceive yourselves, saying the Chaldeans shall go away from us, for they do not go. For though you had smitten the entire army of the Chaldeans who were fighting against you, and there remained only wounded men among them, they would get up, each man in his tent, and burn the city with fire." So he says, go and tell the king of Judah this incredibly difficult thing. Go and tell him that even if they killed all of the Chaldeans, the wounded men that were left, they would come up and they'd destroy the city. They're done for. There's no way that they can win. It came to be when the army of the Chaldeans left the siege of Jerusalem for fear of Pharaoh's army. So all these events set in motion. Pharaoh's army comes up. They leave the siege of Jerusalem, which then would enable Jeremiah to go to the king of Judah. Yehovah says, "Go to the king of Judah and tell him this, that Yirmiyahu went out of Jerusalem to go into the land of Benjamin to receive his portion there in the midst of the people." So now Jeremiah can leave Jerusalem to go and do what Yehovah has told him to do. "And it came to be as he was in the gate of Benjamin," which is, as we'll see later, where the king of Judah is, "a master of the guard was there, whose name was Yeriah, son of Shelemiah, son of Hananiah. And he sees Yirmiyahu the prophet, saying, 'You are deserting to the Chaldeans.' But Yirmiyahu said, 'It is a lie, I'm not deserting to the Chaldeans.' But he did not listen to him, and Yeriah seized Yirmiyahu and brought him to the heads." So Yehovah's told him to go and do this thing. He goes out to do it. He's leaving the gate, or he comes to the gate, and now he's arrested by this guy who thinks that he's deserting. "And the heads were wroth with Yirmiyahu and put him in prison in the house of Jehonathan the scribe, for they had made that for a prison." So now Jeremiah is like, I was going to do what the Lord wanted me to do, and now I found myself in prison. What's this all about? When Yirmiyahu had entered into the dungeon and into the cells, then Yirmiyahu remained there many days. So he's in prison for ages because he was going to go and do what the Lord had told him to do. Now, I'm sure that he's a great man of faith and he's just waiting to see what the Lord's going to do at this point. But he must be thinking, this isn't great. "And Zidkiyahu the king sent and took him out. And the king asked him secretly in his house and said, 'Is there any word from Yehovah?' And Yirmiyahu said, 'There is.' And he said, 'You are given into the hand of the king of Babel.'" Okay, so this is now where he comes to the king and he can deliver this word to him that Yehovah had wanted. Yehovah sends him, he gets arrested, put in prison. Then the king comes or sends and takes him out. Then Yirmiyahu said to Zidkiyahu the king, "What have I sinned against you and against your servants and against this people that you've put me into prison? Where are your prophets who prophesied to you, saying, 'The king of Babel is not coming against you or against this land'? But now please hear, O my master the king, let my petition be accepted before you, and do not make me return to the house of Jehonathan the scribe, lest I die there." Okay, so Jeremiah has been taken out of his position by being told, go to the king of Judah. He goes and he's put in prison. Remember, Yehova knows that all of this is going to happen. He gets to speak to the king. He gets to do what Yehova sent him to do. But now he gets to ask a particular favor of the king. Zikyahu the king then gave orders for Yirmiyahu to be placed in the court of the guard, and that they should give him daily a piece of bread from the baker's street until all the bread in the city was gone. So if Jeremiah had remained where he was, he would have been in the siege of Jerusalem, which we hear about, where you have people eating their children and all sorts of horrible things. He wouldn't have had any food. So him going out of the city to give this word and getting arrested and getting put in prison for all of this time actually positioned him to ask a favor of the king. And the king gave orders that he should have food every day until all the food ran out. Without that happening, Jeremiah would have died. So Yirmiyahu remained in the court of the guard. Chapter 38 says, and Shaphatiyah, son of Matan, and Gadolyahu, and Pashur, and Yuchal, son of Shelemyahu, and Pashur, son of Malchiyah, heard the words which Yirmiyahu had spoken to all the people, saying, thus said Yehova, he who remains in the city shall die by the sword, by scarcity of food, and by pestilence. But whoever goes over to the Chaldeans shall live, and his life shall be a surprise to him, and he shall live. Thus said Yehova, this city is certainly given into the hand of the king of Babel's army, and he shall take it. Then the head said to the king, please let this man be put to death, because he's weakening the hands of the men of battle who are left in this city, and hands of all the people by speaking such words to them. So he's telling everyone to give up. Look, if we're going to fight, put him to death, because he's making them lose their battle. For this man does not seek the peace of this people, but the evil. And Zikyahu the king said, look, he is in your hand. The king is unable to do any matter against you. What am I going to do in this condition? They took Yirmiyahu and threw him into the dungeon of Malchiyahu, the king's son, which was in the court of the guard. And they let Yirmiyahu down with ropes. And in the dungeon there was no water, but mud. So Yirmiyahu sank into the mud. Again, you've got to be thinking at this point, even if you're thinking, this is in Yehovah's hands, I'm trusting in him, you've got to be thinking, these conditions aren't great. How long am I going to be in this dungeon? And Eved Melech the Cushite, one of the eunuchs who was in the king's house, heard that they put Yirmiyahu in the dungeon. So because of exactly where he was, and because it's exactly this guy, he hears that they've put him in the dungeon. The king was sitting at the gate of Binyamin. And Eved Melech came from the king's house and spoke to the king, saying, my master the king, these men have done evil in all that they do to Yirmiyahu the prophet, whom they've thrown into the dungeon. And he's likely to die from hunger in the place where he is, for there is no more bread in the city. And the king commanded Eved Melech the Cushite, saying, take 30 men from here with you. Lift Yirmiyahu out of the dungeon before he dies. So again, he would have been in that situation. He'd have thought, this isn't great, but this guy was in the perfect position to go and speak to the king, to get him to take him to somewhere else where he needs to be, as we'll see. So Eved Melech took the men with him, went into the house of the king under the treasury, took old clothes and old rags from there, and they let them down by ropes into the dungeon to Yirmiyahu. And Eved Melech the Cushite said to Yirmiyahu, please put these old clothes and rags under your armpits, under the ropes. And Yirmiyahu did so. And they pulled Yirmiyahu up with ropes and lifted him out of the dungeon, and Yirmiyahu remained in the court of the guard. Then Zikyahu the king sent and had Yirmiyahu the prophet brought to him at the third entrance of the house of Yehovah. And the king said to Yirmiyahu, I am asking you a matter. Do not hide a matter from me. Yirmiyahu said to Zikyahu, if I declare it to you, shall you not put me to death? And if I give you advice, you shall not listen to me. What's the point? Okay, if I declare this thing to you, you're not going to be happy, you're going to kill me, and the advice you're not going to heed anyway. But Zikyahu the king swore secretly to Yirmiyahu, saying, as Yehovah lives, who made us this life, I do not put you to death, nor do I give you into the hand of these men who seek your life. So him being in this position allows him to then get an oath from the king that he will not let any harm come to Jeremiah. And Yirmiyahu said to Zikyahu, Thus said Yehova, the Elohim Zebaot, the Elohim of Yisrael, if you do indeed surrender to the heads of the king of Babel, then your king shall survive, and the city not be burned with fire, and you and your household shall live. But if you do not surrender to the heads of the kings of Babel, then this city shall be given into the hand of the Chaldeans, and they shall burn it with fire, and you shall not escape from their hand. Then Zidkiyahu the king said to Yirmiyahu, I'm afraid of the Yehudim who have gone over to the Chaldeans, lest they give me into their hand, and they maltreat me. But Yirmiyahu said, they shall not hand you over. Please obey the voice of Yehova which I speak to you, and let it be well with you, and your life be spared. But if you refuse to surrender, this is the word that Yehova has shown me. Then see, all the women who are left in the king of Yehudah's house shall be surrendered to the heads of the king of Babel. And see, they are saying, your close friends have set upon you and prevailed against you. Your feet have sunk in the mire, and they have turned away again. And they are going to surrender all your wives and children to the Chaldeans. And you yourself shall not escape from their hand, but be taken to the by the hand of the king of Babel, and the city shall be burned. Give up. It's all going to be well with you. This is all Yehovah's will. Don't give up, it's going to be very, very bad for you. Then Zidkiyahu said to Yirmiyahu, let no one know of these words, and you shall not die. So now Jeremiah has been given a command by the king. Okay, don't let anyone know about these words. But if the heads hear that I've spoken to you, and they come to you and say to you, declare to us now what you've said to the king, and also what the king said to you, do not hide it from us, and we do not put you to death. Then you shall say to them, I presented my petition before the king, not to send me back to the house of Jehonathan to die there. So if these guys come to you and they say, tell us, or we're going to kill you, tell them this. And all the heads did come to Yirmiyahu and asked him, and he informed them according to all these words that the king had commanded. Okay, he submits to the authority of the king, and he does what the king's commanded him. He doesn't say, oh, actually, maybe in this situation it's going to be to my benefit if I get these people on my side, because they could kill me right now. He doesn't do that. He does what is right. And they said no more to him, for the matter was not heard. So Yirmiyahu remained in the court of the guard until the day that Yerushalayim was taken, and he was there when Yerushalayim was taken. So he remains in the court of the guard until Jerusalem is taken. When Jerusalem's taken, because he's in the court of the guard, this happens. And Nebuchadnezzar, or Kadetzer, whichever one, the king of Babel gave an order concerning Yirmiyahu to Nebuzaradan, chief of the guard, saying, take him, look after him, do no harm whatsoever to him, but do to him even as he shall speak to you. So now, because this entire chain of events has worked out in Jeremiah's life, where he's been kept alive, where he's been given these audiences with the king, he was found in this position so that the king of Babylon, the invading force, could come in and say, do to him exactly as he asks of you. So Yehovah was there throughout all these steps. Jeremiah could have taken it upon himself to step out of the Lord's will at any point that he wished, but he didn't. He did exactly what was right in the Lord's eyes. Psalm 33, 8-22 says, let all the earth fear Yehovah, let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. For he spoke, and it came to be. He commanded, and it stood fast. Yehovah brings the counsel of the nations to naught. He thwarts the plans of the peoples. The counsel of Yehovah stands forever, the plans of his heart to all generations. So it doesn't matter what these rulers come up with. You know, they can have their agenda 2030. If Yehovah doesn't want it to come about, who cares? They'll come up with these plans. They've been coming up with stupid plans for the entirety of history. Blessed is the nation whose Elohim is Yehovah, the people whom he has chosen as his own inheritance. Yehovah has looked from the heavens. He has seen all the sons of men. He looked from his dwelling place on all the inhabitants of the earth. He who fashions the hearts of them all, he who understands all their works. The king is not saved by the multitude of an army. A mighty man is not delivered by his great strength. A horse is a vain means of safety. Neither does it rescue by its great power. Okay, you could say here, getting loads of guns and thinking that you're prepared for something, that's nothing. That's a vain means of safety. To have guns and to think that you're protected, that is vain. You are not putting your trust in Yehovah. They don't rescue by their power. The mighty man's not delivered by his great strength. He's not delivered by the strength of his Barrett 50 cal. See, the eye of Yahweh is on those fearing him, on those waiting for his kindness, to deliver their soul from death and to keep them alive during scarcity of food. Yahweh keeps them alive, just as he did with Jeremiah. He kept Jeremiah alive during scarcity of food. He will keep us alive during scarcity of food as well. We trust in him. We don't trust in ourselves and our own ability to make preparations. Our soul has longed for Yahweh. Our help and our shield is he. For our heart does rejoice in him, for we have put our trust in his set-apart name. Let your kindness, O Yahweh, be upon us, even as we wait for you. Romans 8:16-18 says, the Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of Elohim. And if children, also heirs, truly heirs of Elohim and co-heirs with Messiah, if indeed we suffer with him, in order that we also be exalted together. For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the esteem that is to be revealed in us. Okay, and just as we'll come to a close with this, I want to look at the scriptures. James, there's probably about 8 scriptures left or something like that. I want to look at what it is for us to suffer for Yahweh's name, because he will protect us and he'll keep us from scarcity of food and all of that. But if it's his will, and his will is to achieve a very specific end, then perhaps he will require sacrifice of us. 2 Corinthians 1:3-10 says, blessed be the Elohim and Father of our Master Yeshua Messiah, the Father of compassion and Elohim of all comfort, who is comforting us in all our pressure. Why is he comforting us in all our pressure? What's he achieving through this? Enabling us to comfort those who are in every pressure. Okay, so when something happens in our life and we have his comfort through it, and he sees us through that event, it enables us to comfort others through the comfort which we ourselves are comforted by Elohim. Because as the sufferings of Messiah overflow in us, so our comfort overflows through Messiah. And if we suffer pressure, it is for your comfort and salvation, being worked out in enduring the same sufferings which we also suffer. If we are comforted, it is for your comfort and salvation. And our expectation for you is steadfast, because we know that as you are sharing in the sufferings, so also in the comfort. For we do not wish you to be ignorant, brothers, of our pressure which came to us in Asia, that we were weighed down exceedingly beyond ability, so that we despaired even of life. Now Paul's going to reveal why it is that despairing of life and thinking that we're going to die is actually a good thing. He says, indeed, we had the sentence of death in ourselves. I think that means we had concluded that we were going to die rather than they'd had the death sentence passed over them. That we should not trust in ourselves, but in Elohim who raises the dead. Because if you're in the position where you're going to die, all you can then do is have trust in Elohim who raises the dead. That is your only trust at that point. Who rescued us from so great a death and does rescue, in whom we trust that he shall still rescue us. Matthew 10:28-39 says, do not fear those who can kill the body, but are unable to kill the body and the soul. But rather fear him who is able to destroy soul and body in Gehenna. So this entire context of what he's going to talk about here is not worrying about losing your life, making sure that you're right before Elohim. He says, are not 2 sparrows sold for a copper coin, and not one of them falls to the ground without your Father? And even the hairs of your head are all numbered. So do not fear, you are worth more than many sparrows. Okay, so what he's saying here is, look, don't fear those who can kill you. Because even a sparrow, his life doesn't come to an end without it being under your Father's power. And you're worth more than many sparrows. All the hairs of your head are numbered. Don't forget that Elohim's in charge of every single event here. Everyone therefore who shall confess me before men, him I shall also confess before my Father who is in the heavens. But whoever shall deny me before men, him I shall also deny before my Father who is in the heavens. So the context is, Don't fear them doing harm to you. If it comes to you bearing witness of following the Father, or you following the Father and doing what is right, do that. Okay? If you do that, and you confess me before men, I'll confess you before my Father. But if you do fear those who kill the body, and you deny me before men, I will also deny you before the Father who's in the heavens. Do not think that I've come to bring peace on earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. But I have come to bring division, a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against their mother-in-law. And a man's enemies are those of his own household. He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. So when it comes to the people who are in our family, when it comes to speaking the truth to them, okay, or doing the truth when they want us to do something else perhaps, we are to confess Yeshua before them, and we're not to fear even physical retribution. He who does not take up his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. What's the context of this? Yes, it means, sacrifices Yeshua sacrificed. But the context is giving your life for Yeshua. Don't fear those who can kill the body. Have your eyes set on the eternal. That's how Yehova looks at these things. He sees what comes after it. It doesn't matter if someone takes your life, because what are they doing? They're taking your life so that you can go and be at rest and be with him. He who has found his soul shall lose it, and he that has lost his soul for my sake shall find it. Okay, again, all the context. Don't fear those who kill the body, fear those who can kill the soul. You lose your soul, okay, in this earthly realm for his sake. If you lose it for his sake, you'll find it, okay, in Sheol. You find your soul, in other words, you look after your life in this world more than you look after him, and you deny him, then you'll lose your soul by the one that can kill body and soul. Revelation 6:9-11 says, when he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those having been slain for the word of Elohim and for the witness which they held. I can go back and forth on this verse, whether or not these souls are actually not in Sheol, whether they are particular souls that are in heaven, but it doesn't actually matter. Could just be that their souls, their lives that they've given up speak to Elohim. Whichever one it is, I could see it both ways. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, how long, O Master, set apart and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? And there was given to each one a white robe, and they were told that they should rest a little while longer, until both the number of their fellow servants and their brothers who would be killed as they were was completed. Okay, so for these people, the people who give their lives, it's all part of Yehovah's will. It's part of his plan. And he even says there's a number of them that have got to be killed, and they've not all been killed yet. Isaiah 57:1-2 says, the righteous one is perished, and no one takes it to heart. Kind men are taken away, while no one understands that the righteous one is taken away from the presence of evil. This is Yehovah's purpose, and he sees these things completely different than we see it. Okay, if a righteous one's taken away, he's taken away from the presence of evil. He enters into peace, and those who walk in integrity rest on their beds. Okay, it's no big deal to Yehovah if someone who is righteous dies. It is a big deal if someone who is unrighteous dies, though, because they're going to have their soul destroyed as well.